hou my vas, korporaal. Ek se kind, skoon verdwaal, sal ek ooit my cherry sien, as ek van die terrein af klim. That is an ode to Bernaldus Niemand, who passed away, I think, in the 90s already.
Wow.
That was Afrikaans, if you're not familiar. Wat or wat taal wat 'n boer speak.
Very inspiring.
Okay. John!
Fancy.
Oh, wait. Sorry about that, people. I'm sorry about that. Wasn't supposed to be like that. John!
Fancy.
Good to see you.
It's very nice to see you.
Again.
Yes.
It seems every time we meet, it's always the same Brit and always the same Boer.
Yes.
Boer.
Well, I suppose it's convenient that this channel is not called Brits and Boers.
Do you think there's a correlation there?
Yes.
It's not accidental.
No.
I'm gonna have to think about it. It's quite a deep thought. I'm gonna have to kind of yeah. It seems you're right. Transcription?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, folks, we want to transcribe this. It just makes things much easier.
There we go.
There we go. Bob's your uncle. Welcome to another episode of Brit and Boer with Brit, John, and Boer, Jansie. Today, John, firstly, I just want to say that I hope your lawyer is ready because I mean, there's evidence here that I obviously tripped and fell against one of your plants. And well, let me ask you this. What religion are you?
I'm Christian. Yeah.
Now, I can't take you to court. I can't litigate.
No.
That sucks. What if I change to being a Hindu or Muslim or something, just for a time period so I can sue you and then come back to Christianity? Do you think that's possible? Do you think I'm allowed to do that?
No, I think that's outside the bounds of Christianity.
Okay. Well, in that case, I guess I won't take you to court.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Can I just say I'm very sorry that you tripped over the plants?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your apology accepted.
Thank you.
Yes. Today on Brit and Boer, here's the question. How deep, I don't know how to put this to you. How deep is the state? No, how deep do things go in times of war? So can I expand on that? Will you allow me to expand on that?
I'd love you to.
So we're looking at things going awry in the Middle East from where we're standing, from what media tells us things are going awry in some ways.
Yeah.
In other ways, some people seem to be rejoicing. So you get one camp who's mourning the death of Ayatollah, right? Yeah. And others who are rejoicing at his death. The South African government is rejoicing. No, sorry, they're mourning the death of the Ayatollah, if I'm not mistaken, because we in the pockets of those oaks.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like. But how much of this is his death, things going south? How much of this is planned? How far does it go back? Who all is involved? How many parties are not allowed to say things that they know about? Do you see what I'm saying?
I think I do, yeah.
How obscure is this thing? How dark is it? Not dark in the sense of evil, but dark in the sense of being kept in the dark. Like the Epstein file thing, a lot of people would rather those files weren't released. Yeah. Because they preferred to be, although that was truly dark in the sense of evil, what happened in the Epstein Epstein's life and around him, but also people want to keep it in the dark so that things aren't exposed, right?
Yes.
So how much of this is kind of like we just don't know, we don't understand. And I'll tell you one thing that I found interesting that's in line with this. I watched the Piers Morgan episode and I forgot the guy's name. I forget the guy's name now. He was he's an American professor, Jewish oak, very bright, and he said a very interesting thing on Piers Morgan when Musk cleaned out. You know, he cleaned out US aid and whatever else, and this guy said you can't line item foreign, what's the word?
Foreign aid?
No, not foreign aid. Using foreign aid to overthrow foreign governments that are evil, right? You can't line item that. You can't line item operations where you're actually trying to thwart governments. So what you do is then you use other means and ways to cover up. And when he said that, I was like, oh my word.
Yeah.
Obviously, it seems to the man in the street, it seems to Elon Musk, who's quite a bright oak, but he even didn't pick it up, that these things that he thinks he's cleaning up was actually a way of cleaning up in a different way, or keeping things clean in a different way in your own country. Right. So this is that made me wonder now in the case of Iran how all of these wars going on. Russia, who's now also anti-American, apparently China, apparently North Korea is definitely anti-American. China's, I think the ratio has always been tenuous. So explain to us what's going on here.
So, of course, it's a really big subject.
Oh, yeah.
And there are so many things that are all linked together. But I think let's just begin with looking at the principle of what happens when somebody who is not habitually making decisions within a certain field considers the way the narrative is presented to the ordinary people as it pertains to that field. So imagine, for example, you might be super clever. You might have all sorts of qualifications, but you decide to go and take a job, I don't know, as somebody working in a kitchen at a restaurant, okay? In spite of your cleverness, once you step in to that restaurant, your cleverness is of very little value. You can't suddenly start making rational decisions on behalf of everybody within that arena because you don't know how things work. And it's far from obvious, the relationship between cause and effect in a place like a kitchen. And if you told everybody, stand aside, I'm the boss now, you'll all do what I say, you would overcook the steaks or the steak would come out the right temperature and the vegetables would be cold. Do you know what I mean? It would be burning souffles and whatnot. It would be a disaster. So it doesn't really help when somebody who doesn't habitually operate within a certain sphere tries to reason as though the intricacies, the complexities, the subtleties, the nuances that operate within that sphere are as simplistic as we would like to believe when reasoning from outside that sphere. And normally, when we think about something that doesn't pertain to our daily lives, we don't give it the necessary depth of reflection to be able to reason in a realistic way that would be effective if we were operating in that sphere. So all that said, what I'm really saying as it pertains to war is that your ordinary voter, when he thinks about how these decisions are made, he has very, very little concept of the realities of how these decisions have to be made. And so it's an impossible work, even in a highly democratic administration, to explain the subtleties of the type of decision making that has to happen within that sphere to your ordinary voter, which therefore means you have a perhaps regrettable but inevitable necessity to both keep the people largely in the dark and also to present a narrative to the people that's convenient for them to understand and that doesn't conflict with your agenda to act in a way that's actually genuinely in their interests. Now, it might sound like I've just made a case for government deception of its population within a democracy. And indeed, perhaps that is what I have just done. The question is whether that is immoral or anti-democratic. Now, as you know, I'm a strong supporter of democracy, and I would like to see democracy go so much further than it does in the overwhelming majority of countries where democracy claims to be exercised. And yet even I have to concede that a certain degree of obfuscation and even deception of a country's own population is necessary in times of war, and not only in times of actual visible war, but in times of anticipation of potentially imminent and possibly even distant war. So it goes like this. A country has an armed forces, even in times of peace, largely to prevent war. Because of course, if you have no means to defend yourself, you're going to be taken advantage of by aggressors that do have a means of defending their national interest militarily. And so much of a nation's military strategy is all about disincentivizing foreign hostile actors from interfering with their interests. And so much of what the military does really is about preparing for eventualities which the better it is prepared for, the less likely those eventualities are to occur. However, at some point where your enemy fails to respond in a way that you would argue would be logical, then those preparations you have made for the eventuality of a hot conflict may need to be initiated the moment it becomes clear that your enemy is intent on an illogical route. Okay, and I think this has been the case with Iran. So much of showing off your military, the way that's very obvious in China, where they have these big parades and they bring out all their weaponry. It might not even be operational, but it looks good, in a parade. And, you drill your soldiers to do what in conflict is pretty useless, getting them all to march in step with the leg raisers exactly the same height and all that kind of coordination. It's got very little kind of transferable usefulness into a conflict scenario.
Yeah, it's like doing the K53, but nobody drives like the K53.
Yeah, putting the handbrake on at the stop street.
Yeah, you have to do it, but
that's it. Yeah.
So if everybody drove like it, you'd probably see more accidents on the road.
Yeah.
So imagine those same armies in conflict march. They insist if you attack the enemy, you have to lift your. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So,
but there's method in the madness.
Yes, and so much of what militaries do, most militaries, like well-established historic regiments, will have a ceremonial role and an operational role. Much of the reason for the ceremonial role is to kind of exhibit the standards of discipline and cohesion that the viewer can transpose in his or her imagination into an operational context.
So this is like the haka, the All Blacks is haka.
Yes, that's right, yeah. That's it, yeah.
All of that stuff just to scare you.
That's it.
So like a psychological game.
Yeah, or like South African schools will do, they'll have war cries before a rugby match.
Yeah.
And I think the logic of that is to essentially say, look at how coordinated and aggressive we are. Now, our first 15, if you can imagine, if we as ordinary spectators are so coordinated and aggressive, how coordinated and aggressive are those people going to be? Because that's the creme de la creme, that's the pick of the crop.
Yeah.
And so you
they don't have a hangover.
No.
That's
it.
They drink the rest of the weekend or the rest of the week or whatever.
Yeah.
Or they wait until after the game.
That's it.
But this morning, these kids don't have a hangover.
No,
they're going to play their best game.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so if you go into a conflict with inflated expectations of the performance of your enemy, it can undermine your resolve to do your best, do you see? And so it's a kind of a psyop, if you like a schoolboy psyop. That's very visible to us, and we understand the psychology of that. And what happens in war is much less visible and understandable to ordinary viewers, but it is happening. So a lot of this kind of posturing and bragging and deliberately leaking details of weaponry, that kind of thing, is really a kind of a peacekeeping psychological operation to prevent breakout of hot war. But where you've got an enemy that is so bent on the destruction of its historic foe, like you have between Iran and Israel, then none of that really works. And where you can see that there's this trend, because you see these things don't happen overnight. Like this Ayatollah, he'd been around for a long time, and his rhetoric was very consistent for a long time. And sanctions didn't really make any difference. There was this ongoing resolve on the part of Israel to wipe on the part of Iran to wipe Israel off the face of the map.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to mention now that that's a large part of their being, right? It's not this whole idea of signing peace treaties and whatnot. It's just not going to happen. There's no such thing because it's driven by ideology and religion, right? Thereby, I'm not saying I'm a Christian, so I'm not saying religion is bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying bad religion is bad.
Yeah.
So Iran, there would never have been peace from Iran's side.
No, and the thing is, we can't be hypocritical either as Christians, and as not only Christians, but as Christians who are inheritors of a Judeo-Christian value system and history. And so we may say that, if everyone were a Christian, there'd be no deception in war. We would agree to meet you at dawn on a battlefield. We would make our forces visible to each other and we would engage in an honorable fashion. But actually, that doesn't happen. And it could never happen necessarily. And it has never happened, really. I know we've got this picture of Waterloo, Napoleon versus Wellington, meeting in wherever it was, Belgium or whatnot.
Waterloo, that's not the ABBA song.
Oh no, I don't really know the relationship between the ABBA song and what happened at Waterloo.
No, I don't think there is.
No.
I'm just, it's not, we're not talking about ABBA.
No. Although maybe they were referencing that as something, they had their own personal Waterloo where everything went pear-shaped.
Can return if I wanted to. No, I don't think it's good.
No, all right.
No,
Never mind about that.
nothing about nothing. That song has no reference to Napoleon, I think.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, so again, we're throwing in lots of ideas, and it's not going to make much sense as we go along.
And
But
that's
at the
why I
end-
make these comments as well. I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep this
Yeah.
dark.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I succeeded.
But I think it will all make sense if you as if our viewer
I'm a single viewer.
is sufficiently patient.
Hello, Ma.
Yeah. At the end, it will all make sense. And so,
Just by the way, Jesus never told parables to make sense to the masses. No,
that's true. Yeah.
His goal was to obscure things from
Yeah.
people. He never wanted to make things known.
Yeah. And even all the prophecies about his coming.
They obscure.
That's right.
It's not
Yeah.
exact. What it doesn't
That's
say,
right.
it's tell the exact story.
Yeah.
It's foreshadowing.
That's right. And
There's a reason the word shadow.
And when he was born, literally a handful of people understood that that was the time he was to be born.
Yeah.
Even though the prophecies were available to everybody.
Yeah, and in a sense, that's a war as well.
Yeah.
It was a war.
Yeah.
What he fought a war.
That's right.
He was a general of a war against
Yeah.
darkness. So yes,
Yeah.
it's not splashed like in that what's that movie? Mel Brooks. I love Mel Brooks movies. It's a parody where this team of secret agents come into a town and there's a banner that says "Welcome, secret agents." It's not like that.
Yeah. I haven't seen that. So anyway, so we're kind of covering the area where militaries have to release certain information that they want to be available to the public about how strong they are and how it just wouldn't make sense to mess with them. But at the same time, that's for public consumption. That's like the modern version of the ceremonial role of a military. Do you see what I mean? But there's a covert role of every military. And we're not just talking about, special forces and people on deniable operations. I'm just talking generally about all military action, because all military action is predicated on intelligence. That I'm talking about intelligence in terms of information, that if the extent of that intelligence were known to the enemy, the army or military entity would not actually be able to operate in the same way. So that intelligence has to be kept very secure and acted on in secret. Obviously, this would not be surprising to anyone. And so what has been happening, as I understand it, in the Middle East is that for a long time, Iran's rhetoric towards Israel has not changed. America has tried peacekeeping methods that, in the end, it is forced to concede are not effective. Iran has just been saying whatever it has needed to say in order to convince America that it's not about to act imminently, while continuing to develop its nuclear program. And it apparently has the intention to obliterate Israel. Now, whether or not the information that we receive is reliable, and I would say it's probably far from reliable. This claim about Iran was within 10 days of having a nuclear weapon. I wouldn't think that that's true, but it wouldn't need to be true. That's an example of a narrative that has to be presented to the people to create that necessary level of fear and indignation to support a military intervention. And the reason that governments have to say things like that, like, oh, Iran is within 10 days of having a nuclear weapon, is because if they said, well, Iran is within 6.5 months of having a nuclear weapon, then the people would say, well, why don't you just continue to negotiate? Do you see what I mean? And countries don't just wait until the very day they've got that weapon before initiating a military action. There are pre-deployments. So even now, with this conflict in Iran, Hegseth was asked, are there any boots on the ground? And you see the kind of justifiably indignant way that he answered the question was essentially, well, no, but why would I even tell you if there were? Now, it could be that what he said is false. I wouldn't expect him morally to admit if there were boots on the ground in Iran. But what I think everybody knows, they just may not be aware that they know it because they haven't had to think about it very much, is that before you have a conflict, that conflict is anticipated. This conflict has been anticipated for many years. And so what you do, how is it, for example, that Israel knows the locations of all of the tactical targets that need to be struck immediately within 72 hours of a hot conflict initiating? It's obviously because they have intelligence. Now, how do they get that intelligence? Now, of course, there's signals intelligence, satellite data and that kind of thing, but you can only ascertain so much from your eye in the sky. You also got to have your HUMINT, haven't you? Your human intelligence. Mm-hmm. And that is a combination of having people in the country that are not known to be working for you, traditionally referred to as spies, and having agents who reluctantly work for you, that you have coerced into working for you, either because you've discovered some vice that they don't want their colleagues or family to know about.
Cross-dresser.
Yeah, for example.
Boys who love boys. And
yeah, exactly. That kind of thing.
Caught me at that club in Netherlands, and now I belong to them.
That's right. Or if you didn't have a vice, they will help you in that department by encouraging you to have one. Essentially,
maybe send a bad woman across your way.
They'll honey trap you. Yeah. You see what I mean? So
like an Epstein honey trap.
That's it.
Yeah.
So and this is well understood. This is. I'm not saying anything that people wouldn't.
This is no longer really covert information. This is the way.
Not at all.
This is the way governments operate.
I think everyone knows that. It's just we're too busy with our ordinary lives for people to really reflect on this. Yes, and so let's imagine you've got operating in that country Mossad. You may have some Mossad officers operating in that country, and they are obviously looking for Iranian agents that will work for them. And of course, there are various ways to incentivize. Some will even just do it for money. Others will do it for fear of exposure. Others, they deliberately entrap. So you have the Mossad officers in terms of creating a usable human intelligence network. And then those Mossad officers will have their network of agents that will be feeding them information. It's not information they want to feed. They really have no choice, because the alternative, if they don't cooperate, is much worse than the personal consequences for them if they do cooperate. And so this all happens long before. Now, that's in terms of getting information, but you also need to prepare for strikes. So, look, I don't know to what degree
what strikes are you talking about? Listen, we in South Africa.
Yeah.
You got to. What type of strike? Are you talking toy strikes?
Okay, so back in the day, if you wanted to destroy something, you would send in special forces. They'd move in quite a small team. It might just be like the minimum kind of unit is 4, known as a saber. Or you might have 4 sabers, like 16 people, but often very small groups. It could just be 4 people occupying an observation post just under the brow of a hill, overlooking either a main supply route or a factory that your human intelligence network has informed you has been, I don't know.
Making more than lollipops.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah.
That's right. And so they'll move in there in the dark. They'll literally dig underground. They'll use chicken wire to support a little cavern. There'll be an entrance literally 50 centimeters wide, just enough to drag a Bergen in. They'll go in there just with a couple of sleeping bags, between 4 of them. They'll hotbed, so you'll have 2 people sleeping while 2 people are observing, and they'll be using quite sophisticated optics through a little slit, and they'll be very, very hard to detect. And they're observing and reporting back information about what they observe to some remote commander who has to act on that intelligence in terms of deciding whether or not the human intelligence that they have received, or the signals intelligence.
This is not posted. They don't post it on Facebook.
No.
It's like, just saw like a atom bomb leaving the factory, lol.
No, that's right.
And then like, share.
In fact, in their little book on the front, it's like there's a little card that's slid into a little wallet, and it says contents destroyed. Okay, so literally they've got their little markers, their erasable markers, and they're recording information. Then they're sending encrypted transmissions to command in another country, and then they're erasing the contents. So they are doing this in order to minimize the possibility of needless collateral damage. You see what, and this is with all due respect to the Americans, the Americans have been known for blue on blues, for attacking their own allies accidentally. So I don't know if you've seen video footage of a splash initiated by some American ordnance. So let's say a Predator drone, for example, dropping a bomb on some people. You'll see it's often at night, and all you see is like shapes of white people moving along. Then you see a big splash, and then those white bodies are just lying on the ground dead.
Is it because they're white people?
Well, no, because actually it's a negative. So they may, if they're very black, they'll look very white. But anyway, the point is. So I'm
just saying, white lives matter too.
No, it is true. It is true.
Okay.
That the Americans have been criticized for relying too heavily on
tech.
That's it, exactly. Rather than, the Mark 1.0 eyeball.
The what?
Yeah, the Mark 1 eyeball. In other words, a human eye, a person literally on the ground seeing things for themselves.
I should apologize on behalf of Buddha if we don't understand everything the Brits are saying. So
yeah.
Just bear with us.
No.
He said it's going to make sense in the end.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That remains to be seen. This one trick, as you were.
So, the criticism leveled at the Americans is that they have been too hardware dependent, and what UK Special Forces patrols, particularly during the Gulf War, often had to do was to travel with a large Union Jack. And then when they were in the LUPs, the lying up positions, they used to actually have to display a Union flag, the British flag, at their position so that aerial observations could identify them correctly as British.
Oh, the obvious question is, why not just deceive people? And if you of the
of course.
If you the enemy, why not just display a Union Jack?
Because there's no value in those people going out camping in the middle of the desert on their own, sticking a Union Jack. They're not being shot at anyway. Why go and camp in the middle of the desert with a Union Jack? The fact is, it's the British who are not supposed to be there from the perspective of the people who own the country that they're infiltrating.
Yeah, but if you're trying to protect yourself from your own people, from your side, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So
if you just want to make sure the tech in the sky doesn't think you're the enemy.
yeah,
You're a target.
yes. I mean,
Then-
long term, maybe it would make sense, but it wasn't very well known that this happened. In fact, people who have done this and then gone on to profit from writing books about it are often heavily criticized by their colleagues who just keep their heads down, continue doing their duty, and get justifiably upset that people that they used to work with have gone on and
made money off of this.
Monetized that's right,
their former, what should have been covert position. The
thing is, you can't just publish anything, because in the United Kingdom, you have to submit it to the Ministry of Defence, and they read it, and then either they'll issue a D notice, which basically means do not publish, or they'll just excise parts of it and ask you to change them.
Hang on, does that pertain to fiction as well? So,
Yes.
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, John le Carré.
Yeah.
So he had to, because he was also in, was he in MI5 or 6?
John le Carré actually was a tutor, I think the French tutor, for somebody who was in UK Special Forces, who went on to write a book about his experiences.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to mention who he was, but yeah. So
so even that, he because I mean, I never read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I read Constant Gardener, and I read the Tailor of Panama, which it blew my mind. Le Carré's use of dialogue is untouchable. It's incredible. The guy obviously was super intelligent.
Yeah.
And what he wrote about was obviously inspired by experience, right? Yes. I mean, you can't make that stuff up.
Yeah.
So even that had to be submitted.
Yes, yeah.
So we don't know the half of it, in other words.
No.
Very interesting.
And you see, the thing is, people like us would generally be against censorship, but I say generally in italics, because, of course, we wouldn't want our nation to invest a lot of time and effort into developing standard operating procedures that save lives, that then somebody writes about and compromises and then risks those lives. Do you see what I mean? So there are certain boundaries to what makes sense to defend in terms of freedom of speech.
I have kind of grown in I've gone into a direction where I realize censorship or guardianship is not necessarily all bad.
No.
I look at the crypto landscape, and it's a potential landmine.
Yeah.
But you can say the same of forex, I think, of trading.
Yeah.
And I think regulation is necessary to some degree.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the individual has to take it upon himself to not be a dumbass. He must be a donkey about things. He must make the right decisions. But I think some regulation is good, and I think we don't have to know everything. Just because you think you have to know everything doesn't mean you have to know everything.
Yeah.
How's it going to benefit you to know everything in any case?
Most
Everything
people
behind the
don't
scenes.
wanna know.
I liken it to people surfing, right?
Yeah.
So you surf, you can't see what's underneath you because the water's not, it's not bright and it's not clear enough, right?
Yeah.
If you could, you probably never paddle out because there's so many sharks below you that you're just not aware of. You think the water, you're the only person, you and some other surfers are in the water, you're the only people there. Go scuba diving, go snorkeling, and you have a surprise or two waiting for you. So some murky waters are murky for a reason, and that's not a bad thing.
If most people started to know, most people would realize pretty quickly that they don't want to know.
They don't want to know. They wouldn't want to know
Yeah.
the stuff that's going on.
And I mean, just to give you an example, let's imagine during the Iraq conflict, when you had British special forces doing precisely what we're talking about, moving covertly overland, looking for targets. I'm thinking particularly of when Saddam Hussein had Scud missiles that were within range of Israel, Britain's ally. And so UK special forces were tasked with finding and destroying these Scud missiles. Now, their purpose for being in the war wasn't just to save Israeli lives, but it was to prevent the escalation of a conflict that could have resulted in lives lost on both sides. So ironically, they were actually working in the interest of the country that they were covertly infiltrating. And on one occasion, they were compromised by a little shepherd boy. You know, what I found, just moving in remote areas, is that there's pretty much nowhere on the surface of this planet where you will not sooner or later find somebody moving around.
A little shepherd boy
Yeah,
of
Yeah.
some sort.
that's right, or the equivalent. And so they had this dilemma.
Even in Brazil,
Yeah.
even in the
Yeah, in
deepest-
the Amazon rainforest or whatever. Because think about it. If you're in the rainforest, you're not going to navigate through the thickest, most impenetrable part of that rainforest. You are going to inevitably find yourself looking for some kind of impromptu trail. That trail is made by people. What are you doing absolutely in the middle of nowhere? You might think you're going on some romantic expedition somewhere, but you've still got to make progress. You've still got to contour around some topographical feature. And so you're not going to go bang over the top of it and, you know, gain unnecessary altitude and lose that altitude again and expose yourself to wind coming over the top of the brow of the hill. You're going to contour around it. And so humans find themselves inevitably concentrated where other humans have been. So everyone, or rather what I would say is everywhere, there is almost inevitably someone around. Unless, of course, you cross Antarctica and you leave like the British Antarctic Survey and you head for the South Pole, then you might just find a couple of other kind of crazy expeditioneers trying to race across the South Pole or something. But that's pretty much the only place where you won't find people. And so in this vast desert, there was a patrol. I can't remember whether there were 8 people, something like that. And a shepherd boy just happened to come across them. Now, what would you do in a situation like that? As a Christian?
Yeah, look, man. I know protocol probably calls for the killing of the kid, right?
Yes.
I don't know if I can do that, man.
And you see, ordinary people don't want to be faced with that kind of decision.
Absolutely not.
They don't even want to know that there are people who are defending their liberties, their democracy, that are faced with that kind of decision. And in fact, the people who were in that patrol also didn't want to kill this boy. So they hesitated and they let him go. What happened was he went and presumably told his parents, who presumably told the police, who presumably told the army. And within a very short space of time, there was a massive patrol of police and military looking for these British soldiers. And I think the consequence was that at least half of them were killed. Only, I think, one got away, followed his SOPs and fled to the Syrian border and crossed the fence and got to safety. The other, 2 or 3 got captured and interrogated in quite a hostile fashion. And the whole work of that patrol was compromised. Lives were immediately lost. And there's a possible risk of more lives being lost if their objective wasn't accomplished. All for the sake of preserving the life of one shepherd boy that nobody wanted to kill. Do you see what I mean? And so the people might complain, why are we being left in the dark? Why are you deceiving us? Come on, we weren't born yesterday with this whole Iran conflict. How is it you had everything in place, ready for this attack, and yet you're claiming it's provoked? We know something's going on. Well, okay, but do you really want to know what's going on? Because actually, I don't think you do. Do you see? And so before there is a conflict like the one that we have just seen being initiated last week, being visibly initiated last week, a massive amount of preparation has gone into that. And we're not just talking in terms of electoral terms. You know, in Western democracies, it's not usually Parliament or the Senate or Congress that makes these decisions, because a lot of the people in Congress or the Senate have only just arrived there. They've just been elected. And they can't possibly get to grips with the work of the department that they are overtly responsible for in a very short space of time and make competent decisions. Just like the analogy I gave at the beginning of this talk, where somebody who could be super smart, very authoritative, a great leader, goes into a kitchen and says, everyone stand aside, I'm the boss now, you're going to do things the way I said. What's going to happen? That restaurant is going to lose customers very fast.
1-star Google reviews.
That's right.
It's over, boy.
Exactly. And so what actually has to happen...
A very good restaurant was tanked by a very good leader. Otherwise, a very good leader. But he was just not doing the right thing.
Is this a real situation?
No.
In the scenario. That's right, yeah, exactly. And so politicians...
It's like another analogy I heard once. A friend of mine said, this happened, he's not a lawyer, but he's like an employment specialist. So he says what happened to one of his clients was that the client had a very good, he had a very good mechanic, right, working for him. And the guy was so good that he thought, no, he's gonna make him the shop manager. And then things just went south, man.
Yeah.
He was a great mechanic.
Yeah.
But he couldn't manage people.
No.
So you messed up two things now. You removed a great mechanic, and you've now messed up the rest of the workshop by letting this guy ruin things. Yeah. Maybe inadvertently.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is so you don't want that. You don't want people out of their place.
No.
Yeah.
No, that's right. And so when a new administration takes power, as we think, each minister then reports to his respective department and then is briefed about what is going on, what the threats are. And, you know, we're not just talking militarily. It could be in housing, you know, the threats are massive immigrations, not enough brownfield sites for new developments and that kind of thing. But let's say in the Department of Defense, he is told, he's given a status report, and he can't possibly accommodate all of this new information in the time it would take for him to be able to be seen to be making relevant decisions. So most of these decisions are mostly made in advance. And he has to, it's a little bit like where you've got an expeditionary organization, and then you've got a foreign agent that comes in and charges extra to the clients because they say they're going to be leading the expedition. They know nothing. You know, they've just been sitting in their air-conditioned offices in some other part of the world, and they just fly in the day before. You have to make them look like the leader, you know, and you have to almost kind of invisibly lead them while openly deferring to them and then calling them aside and saying, look, normally we would not take that route because of these reasons. Could you please make the decision to go that way? And then they'll say, oh, yeah, okay. All right, I made the decision. Tomorrow we're going to do this. You know what I mean? It's very important because these people who have been liaising with this foreign agent have confidence in him. They've been communicating with him for 6 months. Maybe they've been walking in the malls in their own country, and he's been advising them on kit selection and whatnot. So they trust him. They don't know these local people in this distant country. They think of these people as just being people who are told what to do. But they're the ones who really know what's going on. And that represents the civil service in most countries. And I'm not advocating for the level of power that the civil service holds and the sense in which our democracy is largely fake, because there are solutions to that. But we don't have time to discuss them in this particular talk. It's going to be too long a tangent. But anyway, that is the reality. And so the situation with Iran is not new. It's been going on for a long time. And I believe the United States Department of Defense has had these operations planned for a very long time. And they're ready to kind of roll them out the moment they're needed. I mean, think about it. Why would a country like the United States happen to have bases where it does have them if it was not already identified a long time ago that there was an elevated risk of conflict in that area? You see, so these things are prepared for long in advance. In fact, so long in advance that peripheral conflicts may actually be provoked in order to innovate an ally of your actual target with enough time to weaken them and embed them in a conflict that they cannot extricate themselves from in preparation for your attack on your primary target. And
in other words, you get the dogs to fight over a bone over there, because you're gonna there's kind of like a main dog here. You want the little yappers that keep him busy over there, so that by the time, actually no, in this case we're probably talking about a big dog that you're trying to distract.
We're talking about a bear.
Yeah, we're talking about a bear that we try and Russian bear. That we want to keep occupied so that we can attack the actual target, and that bear is too distracted with some other yapping dog.
That's right.
That he can't. He's too irritated and too distracted. He can't, like you say, extricate himself from that to oppose you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And none of this is new. None of this should be a surprise. It's the old playbook that hasn't really been significantly modified for a very long time.
Why do you think it's still a surprise, though? Why do you think people are still shocked to hear? I mean, this goes back. I mean, David acted like a madman in front of, I can't remember, is it a Philistine king? Right?
Yeah.
Can't remember his name now. So that was deception, right? David actually slaughtered his master's people while he was under his care. He was very covert in his actions and deceptive.
Yes.
So this is nothing new, right? No. This is nothing. Moses fled after he murdered someone, right? So there's a lot of things that happen that's been... I'm mentioning the Old Testament. I mean, throughout history, this is how it's been. It's never been a surprise. It's always... never afterwards in any case. Why is it still a surprise to people? I think of a movie that I saw many years ago, Wag the Dog, Robert De Niro. I think it's a brilliant movie that displays the spinning, what they call spinning, political spinning in the background. And and so I want to ask you about that. I'll tell you what I want to ask you. But in this movie, the president, I think, gets involved. He gets caught out in a extramarital relationship with someone, and so they have to spin up some sort of a narrative to get people's attention away from that.
Yeah.
All right. And so they get the help of a famous Hollywood director in the movie now, who manages to do an exceptional job. And in the end, they have to actually get rid of the director because he wants to spill the beans, because he's so proud of his work.
Oh, yes.
So that becomes part of the spinning narrative. So I thought it was a really good movie. I thought, okay, well, this is obviously how things happen. How far, though, is that true, though, that they would actually get... Because you have to be very... You have to be... what's not clever... come on, man. What's the word? Creative. You have to be very creative in a lot of these things. I mean, I remember reading things about creative deception during World War II, right?
Yeah.
So to get, it's probably not far-fetched to say that these folks literally get these directors involved for spinning up stories and for spinning up narrative, right?
Yeah.
So they do that.
Well, yes. In fact, often people who are dreaming up operations will read novels and get ideas from novels and use those.
Man, I'm in the wrong game. I should have been a political spinner.
But I mean, going back to the situation with Russia, you don't even have to think very far back, to the Old Testament or whatever. You can just think back to the 70s, where America, it's now known, because of course in that time documents have become declassified. So it's now known what happened in Afghanistan during the 1970s. And I think people kind of conveniently forget that that character, Osama bin Laden, was a US asset. And he was really the conduit for United States support of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Now, why were the United States supporting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan? Well, obviously, it was to innovate Russia. It was to draw Russia into a conflict that there was no chance of them ever getting out of. To my knowledge, nobody has ever, no foreign power has ever won a war in Afghanistan, going all the way back to roughly 320 BC, when Alexander the Great tried it. Alexander the Great from Macedonia, coming through Turkey, going off to Egypt, becoming king / god over there, then working his way through Persia, over the Himalaya, well, towards the Himalaya, I won't say over the Himalaya. He got stuck in Afghanistan, and he was extraordinary for his speed and the motivation of his army. And yet they, all that time ago, could not win in Afghanistan. So that's where he gave up, essentially, and called that the eastern extent of his empire. Since that time, until the present time, I'm not aware of anyone who has breached the borders of that country and won a conflict. The most sophisticated military in the world had to withdraw from that country, essentially to surrender and leave a lot of its ordnance behind. Which is, of course, what has created this surge of refugees into the United States from Afghanistan. Because now it realized, well, hang on, we're responsible for that conflict there. We now need to take care of those people who were helping us, who are now going to be targets for the angry administration who's regaining power. But of course, the motivation for that conflict in Afghanistan, where America had no real interest, was simply to draw Russia in. So Russia would be weakened so that there was minimal possibility of Russia having the motivation, intent, available resources to engage the United States in a hot war that followed the Cold War. And this is not speculative. Certain people who are involved with those decisions, I think they now brag about how they served their country by avoiding more significant wars elsewhere. I can't remember the guy's name. There's a guy called Charlie somebody. If people Google, Charlie, US administration, Afghanistan war, boast, I think they'll find the story where he explains how it was a strategy that had absolutely nothing to do with the official narrative that we're given for the aforementioned reasons. And so now it is not at all far-fetched that we may be supporting a nation on the edge of Europe to maintain a conflict that draws in Russia and weakens Russia to the extent that it just doesn't have the capacity to move to Iran's aid. And, people may think that that is speculative, but I think it would be bizarre if that were not the strategy. Mm-hmm. Because this Iran thing has been going on for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So that's frankly how war is waged. And I'm not even going to say modern war is waged. Mm. That is how war has always been waged.
Yeah, I mean, the hearts and the ideas and the minds are still the same, right? The tech is upgraded, but mankind hasn't really upgraded. We still the same type of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe degraded in some ways, going backwards.
Yeah.
Some would say.
Yeah.
But the methods, I mean, if they had our tech 2,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, would have still been the same. It would have been covert and dark ops and all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
It's like you said. I mean, how many guys are sent into the promised land to go check it out? I can't remember now.
Yeah.
12, was it?
I can't remember, but no, it's very few.
And so they had to go check out the promised land. They didn't go in there with banners saying, "Hey, we're here to take you over."
No.
We're here to take over what's yours, and it was like a covert operation.
Yeah.
And that's there's a lot of things we just we don't know about. It's better.
And the irony is that the more effective those methods are to secure our liberty and democracy, the more peaceful and straightforward lives we have. And the less ordinary people have to get involved in that way of thinking. And so the more condemning ordinary, decent, honest people would be of an administration that effectively deployed those methodologies to perpetuate the liberties and democracy that people in that now critical society enjoy. You see? So, it's sad. Of course, we all wish that people could be peaceful and open and straightforward and tell their populations the truth. But the sad reality is that it could never work. I had a conversation with somebody who had served, I think, for 26 years in Central Intelligence Agency in the United States. And he was trying to use me as a conduit to get to a politician in the UK to try to promote his area of work. He was trying to get me to get hold of a certain politician in the UK who happened to be quite close to Trump during the first administration, because really he and another guy who was, I don't know how long, in the NSA, wanted to be invited to the White House to discuss their work, which was open source intelligence. And you see, of course, I'm an advocate for direct democracy. And that's kind of predicated on having an informed population, where government, before it makes decisions, makes available information about the decisions it's going to make, and then allows the population to have a little bit of time to understand the arguments for and against a given proposal, and to vote on that proposal, and to require its own government to act according to its expressed will. And of course, I'm an ardent advocate for that, but I would never expect to extend that genre of decision-making and democracy into an area that is militarily sensitive, because to do so, I think inevitably would cost massive loss of innocent lives. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Whereas these two characters, one has passed away now, we're advocating is that for more transparency. You see, because what was happening, and the thing is, the big problem with all of this is that it's open to abuse. See, what happens is hawkish generals claim to have access to secret intelligence that's so secret that even the president may not want to know much about the intelligence that they have. And so they then become the people with whom the kind of informational buck stops. Do you see what I mean? They want autonomy to make military decisions autonomously. And sometimes these decisions are very bad decisions, which even if subsequently a population could be informed about all the facts, they would strongly vote against that type of military action. And so this was at the time that I was approached was at the time where I think Assad was alleged to have gassed some of his own people. I don't know if you remember that, like in Syria. And what I was being told was that this was a false flag operation in order to upset American sensibilities to provoke Trump into intervening in Syria. Do you see? And so he was arguing that his model of open source intelligence could better inform decision makers. And it's very noble. And to a degree, I agreed with aspects of what he was advocating. But you have to draw a very strict line where you have information that is genuinely sensitive. And in case it's not immediately obvious what I mean about that, you can look at an example in 1962, I think it was. Now, I don't know whether or not it's very common knowledge that I think in the 50s, the United States had installed bases in Eastern Europe within tactical range of Moscow and St. Petersburg. And so normally we don't hear that part, we just hear the next part. And the next part is that Russia had obtained a presence in Cuba within tactical range of Washington. And when the United States found out about Russia's presence in Cuba, it was then faced with a dilemma. It's a democratic country. Russia now is behaving aggressively by installing a base within range of Washington. So what is it going to do? Is it going to announce to its own population its findings and then ask its people for permission to invade Cuba? Now, what would happen if it did that? If the American public knew what the Department of Defense knew about Russia's activities, then the extent of that knowledge wouldn't only be available to its own people, it would obviously be available to Russia. And if America is spending time canvassing the opinions of its own public, That's to a certain end. What end? Obviously, it's an invasion of Cuba. So Russia can see that America is preparing to act, to intervene in Cuba. And so basically, it's got a predictable timeline within which to act. And since it's got a base that is sufficiently threatening to the United States that it impels this whole democratic process of seeking permission to act, it's essentially compelled to act before America has the opportunity to act itself. So what's it going to do? It's potentially going to attack early, whereas it need not have attacked at all. Because as from the perspective of Russia, all it was doing was offering, or rather installing an equally threatening presence proximate to Washington that the United States already had, proximate to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Do you see? And so what instead happened is inevitably, unfortunately, what has to happen. And I don't like it, but it is inevitable, is that the United States military, it was the whoever reports to the Joint Chief of Staff, I don't know exactly who that is, but they drew up an operation where they were seeking permission to preemptively attack Cuba. Are you familiar with this? Okay, so they drew up an operation known as Operation Northwoods, and it's a declassified document. You can Google it and see the original PDF with very few excisions. And in that document, you'll learn quite a lot about the necessary methodology of a Department of Defense ahead of having to deceive its own population into becoming righteously indignant about the fact that another nation is threatening it, to create that helpful wave of indignation to support that preemptive invasion that they're seeking democratic permission for. Do you see what I mean? And so within this operation, they were going to crash remote-controlled planes. We're going to make it look like some students were going on a field trip to, I don't know, Hawaii. Maybe it's not Hawaii, but let's just say it is. And then that plane was going to be routed from, I don't know, Florida. Is Hawaii on that side? No, it's not on that side. Forget about Hawaii. They were going to fly some students on a field trip from somewhere in the southern United States to somewhere else that was going to happen to pass fairly close to Cuban airspace, which I suppose is the Gulf of Guantanamo. And it was going to be shot down. And then they were going to have fake funerals with coffins, with American flags draped over them. And they were going to show footage of these students getting on the plane. And it was going to make the Americans very emotional about what Cuba had done.
None of this happened.
No.
None of this would have happened. It was, it was staged.
So, absolutely staged.
Yeah.
Because they explained, they decant the people off. And so they were talking about using remote-controlled airplanes in 1962 or 63.
What would happen? I mean, how do you, if you were in those photos and somebody recognized you, does that mean you had to go into hiding or what? Because you did now.
Yeah.
You give up your life.
You see, the thing is, there are always, with these kinds of operations, you don't have to convince everybody.
Just convince some of them.
There will always be these weirdos running around claiming that they've seen one of the people who was there. But if you've got 300 million people believing a story and you've got 1,000 people disbelieving it, those 1,000 people won't have sufficient credibility to make any impact on that 300 million.
They're the wackos.
Yes, yeah. So it doesn't really matter. You can get away with quite a lot of sloppiness. You can get away with having the same crisis actors interviewed in lots of different kind of school shootings and all that kind of thing, allegedly. I'm not saying that ever happens, but that's what they would claim. These people who claim to have...
You can get away with a moon landing.
Yeah, for example. So now I genuinely don't know whether things that are claimed to have happened or not. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I remain open-minded about it. But what I do know is what I read from the source whose behavior we're discussing right now. And that is declassified documents that nobody questions the veracity of. I mean, they even published on the very websites of those same institutions who authored them. Do you see? Because they're required to be, because they're declassified operational documents. And so what we know beyond any doubt is that these are the methodologies. And so they were going to blow up their own plane and blame it on the Cubans. They were going to dress people up as Cubans and have them perform little mini acts of terrorism in the US, I think around military bases or something like that. And they're going to capture some.
This is literally like directing a movie.
Yeah, that's
it. You've got scripts, you've got actors, you've got a storyline, you've got antagonists.
Think about David.
Protagonists, yeah.
It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Having a little bit of spittle on his beard and looking all crazy before that Philistine king. It's the same thing.
Roll the credits. I mean, this is literally, I mean, Oscar material.
They were going to send, I think, a destroyer or some kind of naval vessel and allow it kind of just to drift into Cuban waters, but not in an aggressive way, just on the periphery. And they were going to bomb it themselves and blame it on the Cubans, and it was going to be empty.
Sure.
So they're willing to destroy expensive ordnance, planes and ships, and do all of this choreography in order to, again, I think the exact wording is create a helpful wave of indignation amongst the American people to support a preemptive invasion of Cuba. You see? Now,
and I mean, it's very easy to, if you were to tell people, oh, this is fake, guys, very easy for them to tell you, what, you anti-American pig.
That's right.
You know, so it's very difficult to go up against any of that sort of covert deception.
Yeah.
Because you could very well be ostracized.
And the question is, do you want to go up against that covert deception?
No. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying you would.
No, I wouldn't want to.
No.
But I'm saying anybody who does, who maybe has a misplaced, what I would consider a misplaced, like feeling of
indignation.
No, not indignation. Yeah, indignation, I suppose.
At being deceived.
Yeah, or you know, he thinks he has to pursue truth at any and all costs.
Yeah,
and I mean, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I would prefer my surf waters to be
murky.
Murky.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, don't show me everything. I'm quite happy to not know everything. I've heard of people going crazy because they know too much.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the entire Christian faith is actually predicated on the very same principle. That's why we are told we walk by faith, not by sight. If we could see where we were going, we would be so stressed that we'd need more SSRIs than the unbelieving population.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I read about Amy Carmichael this morning.
Don't know who that is.
Yeah, she was a missionary. And her last 20 years was spent in bed because she prayed that she won. I can't remember the exact prayer. She Irish. I think she was Irish, and she ended up in India. And she prayed some very short prayer one day, and the next moment she fell into a hole. Yeah, and she twisted her back and whatnot, and it literally put her in bed for 20 years. And so she walked by faith. It's a terrible thing to be stuck in bed for 20 years. So she walked by faith, and she didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
Else she would have stressed herself to death.
Yes.
Right. So I mean, that's one story. Countless throughout history of people who burnt at the stake for believing what they believe and for following Christ. So. Yeah, it's a very good way to look at it. we should prefer murky waters in many cases. I mean, we live in a day and age where you get these prophets, air quotes, going around telling people their futures in the name of Christ, which I think is horrendous. It's horrendous. Well, firstly, I think it's false. Secondly, it's just ridiculous. Why would you want to know what your...
It sounds like the product of mental illness.
It does sound. It is, I think, mentally disturbing at the very least. In any case. So sorry. So there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we... And much of what is brought into the scene is brought in by design.
Yes.
To deceive.
Yes.
So don't believe... Well, after this talk, you want to say, believe what you're being fed. It's better for you. But you know what I mean? It's not, don't believe everything you read and see. But also don't stress, man. I mean, well, if you're a Christian, don't stress. If you are not a Christian, you need to turn to Christ. Because this life is the best it's going to get. And if that's the best you want, I'm sorry, man, you're settling for nothing. And you have a lot to be stressed about if you're not a Christian and you have yet to face the Father on the day of judgment, which the Bible speaks of. But for the Christian, I mean, we carry on and we enjoy the things that the Lord give us, and we kind of quite happy to not know everything, right? It's just, and some are granted more information, like yourself. You know more about these things than others, and so it's good to speak to people like you to hear about what's really going on. Because for me, it's quite interesting. So it's at least interesting to hear these things. Fascinating. I think it was Wag the Dog, that movie, that actually got me thinking about. I just took whatever the government or newspapers or whatever told me.
Yeah.
I just took it at face value, and I realized, oh my word, Jancy, you are a dumb donkey.
I think, I have this parabolic theory of everything. And it would really argue that it's best to know nothing and want to know nothing and be content, or understand very well. But the ground in between those 2 points is highly undesirable. You see, what happens with a lot of people, and the availability of information on the internet now feeds this problem, is that people acquire a little bit of knowledge, and that actually negatively predisposes them towards their own governments. Now, I'm highly critical of government, and yet, as somebody who has spent a lot of his spare time and even resources working against some bad decisions that government has made, I would still be inclined to not want to interfere with this whole process of how governments are permitted to make these decisions. Absolutely, there are abuses, and sometimes very good people get involved in the process of having to maintain the deception to their detriment. I mean, if you think about, for example, we're talking about that Operation Northwoods, which never actually was executed, which is interesting, because the fact that it wasn't executed and Russia's activities in Cuba didn't spiral into World War III is evidence that there was no necessity to execute an operation like that. Do you see what I mean? And again, that brings us to something which we could briefly touch on, which is a bit of a parenthesis at some point in a moment, about situational ethics, about torturing people for information, preemptively killing people that you think are about to do something bad, all that kind of thing. But the fact is that this operation, it wasn't just something that was drafted by some enthusiastic people who had read too many spy novels or anything like that. It was actually signed by the Joint Chief of Staff Admiral Lemnitzer at the time, which meant that the kind of the military had sanctioned it and were ready to operate. It only needed, from what I understand, I'm not quite sure how it works in the United States, but I think it needed to reach the attention of the president, who had to approve it, who at the time was, of course, John Francis Kennedy. And he didn't approve it, from what I understand. And the following year, he met his end, you see. Now, it could be he was assassinated by some crazy individual. That's certainly possible. I keep an open mind about it. But it could also be that the actual powers that be, in terms of the continuing administration, rather than the temporary political class that feigns a level of control that they don't actually have, it could be that that continuing power that it was recognized that this president was actually a threat to national security. Do you see what I mean? With his, in the same way that, imagine Elon Musk was so insistent on pursuing his Doge ambitions and reducing government expenditure in the United States by 2 trillion, for example. And he saw all of these, obviously, I'm not saying this is what happened, I'm just speculating. He saw all of these dubious accounting values and took them at face value and thought, no, this is a flagrant waste of US tax-paying money. And perhaps many were. Perhaps the majority were. Perhaps nearly all of them were. But it may be that in the process of having carte blanche to go through these accounts and turn off the tap of funding to these various departments, things that cannot be overtly accounted for, such as, for example, honey trapping a nuclear scientist in Iran and filming some decision maker in an allied country where their foreign policy is taking a concerning turn and you need to bring them back online. So providing funds for a surveillance team to monitor his activities and obtain proof of him doing bad things with little boys, for example. These things that can't be accounted for and have to be given some kind of euphemistic description.
Sex change operation.
Yeah, for example. Or
it looks ridiculous to the man in the street.
Yeah.
But Musk doesn't even pick that up.
No, but the thing is, Musk didn't stick around for very long.
He didn't.
And he wasn't very insistent. And, you know, Musk tends to wear his heart on his sleeve. I think he says in public what he thinks in private.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
he's very much like me, only more clever. Not as attractive, but a few IQ points higher than myself. And he's got a few dollars more in the bank account too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Even after yesterday's performance.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So it could be that he saw sense, you know, and they said, look, we appreciate what you're trying to do, but this can't really reach public scrutiny because we have to obfuscate how we actually spend money. Do you see what I mean?
We're not going to assassinate you, even though at this point you actually deserve it.
Yeah.
Quite literally, I mean, I looked at the way he's going on about the whole USAID thing and how he's cleaning up, and I thought, how is this guy still alive, man? How is he not had a heart attack from a jog or something, you know? Yeah. Because it's not the type of thing you just spill out into the public.
Yeah.
Everything for the very reason of trying to protect the public as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a tremendously sad thing. And I'm definitely not saying never question your government. Everything they do is good. Definitely I'm not saying that at all. I think there are definite abuses.
For sure. I mean, this lays the ground for abuse.
Yeah.
The sort of covert operations must be a hotbed for abuse, right? I mean, because you could lie about anything. You say, no, that the reason we did that was because. Meanwhile, it was just for your own personal gain.
People can even convince themselves that they're acting in the national interest, whereas they're removing inconvenient political enemies.
Yeah.
So it does open a kind of a can of worms and is very much open to abuse. But unfortunately, history has proven time and again with very good people like David that this kind of methodology is necessary and inevitable.
I have a question for you. How many people throughout history, or even now, walk around ostracized and rejected and hated because of decisions they made that were for the people, the very people that hate them now? Do you think that happens? Do you think there are people walking around with secrets they're not allowed to tell people and they are hated? I'm not saying Hitler. Hitler was obviously a bad guy.
Yeah.
As Ricky Gervais said in one of his stand-up skits, I don't care what you guys say, Hitler was a bad person. So, I mean, we know that. But are there actually good people out there who bear the tag, they bear the little the little mark of demon?
Yeah, one or two names come to mind that I'm not even going to mention because
it sucks.
Because it would take too much work to give the people time to look at the same material that others of us may have already come across to reach the same conclusion.
Yeah.
And so you could look like a very wicked person for even entertaining the possibility that that person is anything other than an utter reprobate. Yeah.
Epstein. I knew it. Epstein was actually a good guy, wasn't he?
Okay, so I would never say that anybody who facilitates little girls being exploited against the prohibitions of Scripture could in any way be described as good. However, since you raised this, let's just imagine.
I was being facetious, by the way. I don't think Epstein was a good guy.
Okay.
I think he was a tool.
Yeah.
I think he was used by people, but he wasn't a good guy. And you can't use a good guy for the purposes that the people above him wanted to use him for.
This is the problem.
Yeah. There's no Christian that you'll be able to use to honey trap people the way he did.
No.
It's not going to happen.
That's it.
Any Christian that tries to be a Christian, let me put it that way.
Yeah, no, and I mean, just in the past, with my own kind of extremely minor activities, I've sometimes had somebody on the team that nobody else likes, and sometimes people have asked me, why do you even keep him on the team? Nobody likes him, he's so awkward. And then I've asked that person, okay, I just sent this person to go and do this particular thing. Would you have been willing to do this particular thing in this particular way? And they've said, actually, no.
Because, our viewer actually wrote in the other day and asked, Jansie, why are you still on the team? Nobody likes you. Why are you still on Brit Boer? Nobody likes you. What are you doing there? You throw your papers off the table, you just act stupid. And then my reply was, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
You can't have Brit and.
No.
That's not a good name.
No.
It's a dumbass name. Brit and. How does that make sense?
No, because people would...
One single viewer.
That abbreviate it, because we don't even say Brit and Boer, do we? We say Brit Boer.
Brit Boer.
So if you just say Britain, people will think it's a podcast about Britain.
And it's not necessarily.
No.
It's a podcast by a Briton.
We barely talk about Britain.
Stop asking stupid questions, all right?
Yeah.
Just accept I'm not going anywhere.
But just as an intellectual exercise, and definitely not because...
Intellectual exercise, John.
Not because I would even entertain the possibility that somebody like the person who you mentioned could in any way be good. Okay.
Like
But-
Epstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just as an intellectual exercise, let us just imagine that you are having to reason from the perspective of Israel. Okay? Now let's imagine that everyone hates Israel. Okay, fine. But Israel still has to exist from its own perspective. So it has to survive. And let's imagine they say, okay, everyone hates us, no problem. That's fine. But please accept the fact that we have to do everything reasonably within our means to survive. And so listen to the way we're now going to rationalize the decisions that we make. Okay. Now, I can't say for sure that Epstein was a Mossad-sponsored honey trap operator, whatever you want to call it. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that he was. Now, if Israel has to survive, as we've mentioned before, being surrounded by so many enemies that very openly say they want to wipe them off the map into the Mediterranean Ocean. That's the kind of symbolism that they use. And again, I'm not saying Arabs are evil, Israelis are good. I'm not saying that. I'm just speaking pragmatically and objectively from the perspective of a small nation surrounded by enemies that has a duty to do what it can to survive. So it needs to have friends in high places. It needs to have the support of strong militaries that are stronger than the collective militaries. Did I say ministries or militaries? I meant militaries. It needs to have friends whose militaries combined are stronger than the sum total of the militaries of their enemies in order to maintain peace, prevent conflict, and preserve their survival. And so let's imagine, for argument's sake, Israel has no interest in war or secret intelligence or dubious little operations that are highly deceptive. It has no interest. It just wants to do clever things, develop technology, prosper its nation, grow its population.
Tan on the beach in Tel Aviv.
That's what it wants to do.
Come on,
Okay.
man. Grow olives.
But I'm not criticizing the Arabs. You know, they can't help it. They are apparently born with a desire to
Destroy
destroy
Jews.
Israel. If you believe what their leaders say, which maybe the populations don't think the same way as their leaders, so I don't know. But just going on the basis of what their leaders say, and their leaders are the ones who control their militaries or who make decisions that fund proxies for their militaries to perpetrate terrorist actions in Israel or against Israeli interests. So going on the basis of what the leaders of those countries say, you, as arguably a peace-loving nation that just wants to suntan on the beach and do clever technology and grow your population, you think, well, what a shame. We're going to have to start thinking strategically about how to defend ourselves in a highly asymmetric environment. Because little Israel on its own has no chance. Okay, we've got a great air force, you know, we're well trained, we're smart people, but there's no way that we could stave off a coordinated attack if all our enemies decide to work together against us. So what are we going to do? We need to find someone with a strong military to have our back. So they forge alliances. Now, historically, of course, they had strong presence in the United States because after the during the Second World War and after as well, there was a kind of mini exodus of Jews to America. And so they already had the opportunity to exhibit their capabilities in America in a way that would have convinced decision makers within the administration to invite them into positions of influence. And arguably that's meritocratic. That's not the consequence of deceitful kind of strategic manipulation. But then even since then, is it immoral for a nation like Israel, who has no, absent controlling United States, controlling is far too strong a word, absence having significant influence in United States foreign policy, and maybe that of the United Kingdom as well, absent that, they have no plausible means of maintaining their survival. So imagine now we're Israel and we're thinking, look, we just want to suntan on the beach in Tel Aviv and grow our technology and our population.
And olives.
Yeah, and Jaffa oranges. But actually, we've got to survive. So what are we going to do, Yancy? Tell you what.
Jaffa orange, what is that, like a narchi?
Yeah, exactly.
Narchi.
That's right. Yeah.
Those are good.
Yeah, you see Lot.
What are we going to do?
Lot went east, Abraham went west. The Jews ended up with the oranges, and the Arabs ended up with the oil.
Oh.
So,
But you can eat the oranges.
That's right.
You can't drink the oil.
No.
Not really.
Well, you can now. I don't know if you've noticed that, but yeah, they are now using the fractional distillation process to synthesize artificial butter. Have you not seen that?
No.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah, and it tastes just like butter.
What's the nutritional value, though, compared
I
to
don't
butter?
think it has any. I don't think it has any at all.
Well, you see, that's the problem with all of these.
Yeah. Apparently it's delicious. And you can't tell the difference.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, not to get distracted. So, so now we're here thinking on behalf of Israel. So we're Jewish and we're thinking, well, shame we're Jewish. Everyone hates us, but we've got to survive, haven't we? So what are we going to do? Our military, as good as it is too small to stave off all our enemies. So we need to find a really big military somewhere that can fight for us, that can at least be sufficiently intimidating to disincentivize our enemies from attacking us. Doesn't that sound like the moral thing to do? And so what are we going to do? So you need to use your cleverness to find a way of gaining the support of a foreign power with a massive military. The obvious target is, of course, the United States. How are you going to get decision makers in the United States to align their foreign policy with yours? Now,
I mean, also, I think what comes into play is also the very easy connection between Judaism and Christianity, right?
Certainly, yes. And,
I mean, it's much easier to convince a nation like America to partner with you because of your shared history
that's right,
than it would be to go to Russia or whoever else who doesn't share necessarily your Christian heritage or your Judeo-Christian heritage.
And of course, to a lesser extent, the United Kingdom.
And just by the way, this is the same reason probably Trump is getting Afrikaners and the like into America.
Yes,
I think we've spoken about this before. Hardly any assimilation required, right?
Yeah.
We think like them. We imbibe their content, whether culture, pop culture.
Yeah.
We reason like them. So it's much easier to get people like us to assimilate, which there hardly is any of required, than it is to get people from foreign countries who don't even speak English. So it's a similar situation.
That's
like
right,
seeks like.
That's right. However, you always need a kind of an insurance policy. So,
and this is where the honeypot comes in, or honey trap, whatever you want to call it.
See, I see America as a bit like if we can anthropomorphize America. America is like a hard-working individual that has benefited from his Protestant work ethic to inevitably become successful.
Yeah.
What does a successful person do who is successful as a consequence of adherence to a Protestant work ethic and a Judeo-Christian value set? Well, once he ensures he's taken care of himself, he's taken care of his family, he looks around for somebody else to assist. And so an ordinary individual, if he becomes incredibly wealthy, will usually start some kind of a foundation or a trust or something and find people less fortunate to help. Now, of course, that could be done cynically for tax breaks, and it could be disguised as a philanthropic work, whereas actually it's developing a business interest that he's obfuscating as business when he's disguising something which is really a business as a philanthropic endeavor.
Or you even get cases where philanthropy is, evil is dressed up as philanthropy. So
Certainly,
seemingly, like family health type things.
Yeah.
And it's actually, if you think about it, if you look into their doctrine, their stated why they exist, statement of faith, basically.
Yeah.
You see, oh my word, this is actually evil.
Yeah, like sterilizing the African population because you love them, you know?
Yeah, or being pro-abortion.
Yeah.
Why? Why is this? Why? And then dressing it up as a concern for females, for women.
Yeah. So anyway, so I was just qualifying the fact that not every work of, I'm not naive enough to think that every work of philanthropy is
a work of philanthropy.
And is a positive consequence of our Judeo-Christian value system. Of course, it's abused, but the whole culture, the fact that people want to talk about philanthropy, which is anyway, that's a separate subject, but the fact that this concept of philanthropy exists in Western countries is kind of evidence of the fact that it is their culture to do good with any kind of excess that can be justified once you've taken care of your main responsibilities. And so America, like an individual who becomes wealthy and just wants to help the poor, and genuinely altruistically, bearing in mind there's no such thing as real altruism. We discussed that on the first episode. Because there's always personal reward at the end of the day, whether in this life or the next.
Yeah.
America's attitude as a nation, I think, is the same. America has become very productive, very prosperous as a consequence of adhering to a Protestant work ethic. And it's generated excess. And now it looks around the world for who should appear at the top of its list in terms of its hierarchical priorities. And so when creating a hierarchy of priorities, you are looking at how can you do as much good as possible with as little as possible. You want to have that action to impact ratio optimized. And so America, when looking at the world, would of course think, well, a little bit of resources put over here can prevent massively bad things from happening. So those are resources well used. So America's interest in maintaining peace in the Middle East, the Middle East essentially being the powder keg of the entire world, is absolutely coherent with its value system of looking abroad once it's taken care of its own people to see where it can do the most good in the most efficient way. So I would say that its interventions in the Middle East, well, sometimes misguided historically, or the Far East, and while always contaminated by certain kind of rogue elements that want to prosper personally as a consequence of this kind of genre of policy making, nonetheless are genuinely motivated by the United States kind of collectively as a people in terms of their ethos of genuinely wanting to do good in the world. However, that's not enough, because you can have an administration, we're all humans. If you had an administration, the head of which happened to be negatively predisposed towards you, simply because he was born with a religion that is historically antagonistic towards your people, you need to have insurance policies so that in that event, you don't have a single decision maker somehow managing to overcome the pressure of his own civil service to change public policy in a very significant direction that's going to militate against your survival. And so we, sitting here in Israel, we would need to think, okay, look, let's go for America because they are genuinely good, if you like, in terms of their desire to do genuine good in the world and to maintain peace and prevent disorder and chaos and loss and destruction and avoidable aggression. However, let's be real. What if we invest a lot of our energy into creating and maintaining that relationship with Israel, and then lo and behold, the population elects some charismatic leader who happens to be of a disposition or religious affiliation that is not particularly enthusiastic about our ongoing survival? What are we going to do, Yancy? Do you see what I mean? And so inevitably, we would think, well, we have to have some kind of leverage over their decision-making apparatus. And how do we do that? Well, obviously, you follow the chain of command to the top. And in any kind of domain where decisions are made that affect our national interest, particularly in terms of our survival, we need to engineer ourselves into a relationship, the nature of which we can just call that person and say, please, we really don't think it's going to be in our mutual interest if you move public policy or foreign policy in that particular direction. And if they say, well, frankly, I don't agree with you. I see how that may not be in your interest, but actually it's in my national interest. So in this instance, I'm afraid you're on your own. Good luck. You've survived 6,000 years already. I'm sure you're going to be all right. And then we need to be able to say, I really had hoped it wouldn't come to this, and as reluctant as I am to have this kind of conversation with you,
I'm going to have to now press the send button on this
email
to you with a video attached to it.
Yeah, I'm going to help sensitize you to the concept of how there may be painful consequences of the decision you're about to make.
Right.
Yeah.
What I want to say on that, now you get guys, I don't even want to mention this guy's name. I'm not a fan. Fuentes, who says the Jews control everything. My problem with that statement is he makes it sound like everybody's a victim, right? So if, say for instance, Epstein was a honey trap, right?
Yeah.
We don't know for certain because, I mean, there wasn't
not for certain.
There wasn't an email sent out that explicitly says, guess what, Jeffrey Epstein was a honey trap for Israeli forces or whatever, for Mossad or whatever. We don't know, okay? We can speculate. But so my problem I have with any statement that says any nation rules another nation, especially in this case, is, okay, so what you're saying is you're a victim. You don't have any autonomy of your own decisions. You poor little thing. Jeffrey Epstein forced you at gunpoint to come to his island and have sex with underage girls.
Yeah.
It makes it more ridiculous.
Yeah.
It makes these grown men sound like children.
Yeah.
What is this? The British Charles's brother, wasn't it? Andrew, who's arrested now. Wasn't it for the very? I mean,
allegedly.
Yeah. So in other words, he has no control of himself. The poor little thing. He's a victim of the Jews. That's what you're saying. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. He's exploiting your weakness, but that's your own stupidity. You got to be man enough to stand up against any possible deception. So that's the problem I have with this narrative, which is widely accepted. It seems that no, the Jews control everything. They control the porn industry. Well, guess what? You don't have to watch porn. Why the heck are you watching porn? What are you, like a loser or what? If you watch porn, you're a loser. You're a loser. It's not the Jews who are controlling you. You're a freaking loser, buddy. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to that point of view.
No.
That's a Sting song, by the way. If the Russians love their children too. Any case, I hope the Russians love their children too.
I'm sure they do. I know a Russian who loves her children.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I know some Russians. They're very nice people.
Yeah.
They seem to. The one is beautiful, gorgeous. Any case, so this is complex, man. This is deep stuff.
Yeah, it is.
In one sense, I want to tell people, don't believe everything you hear or read. In another sense, we want to say, again, don't worry, man. This is part of life. This is part of the workings of things that we're just not going to understand everything.
Yeah, but it's almost as though you want to kind of say to them, look, you are somewhere along that bell-shaped curve.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna reference your bell-shaped curve now.
Yes, and so if you're at the origin, 0, 0, you're in a great place. Stay there. Don't disturb your mind with moving along the x-axis. But if you can't help yourself and you've already started moving along the x-axis, maybe just keep your mouth closed until you get all the way to the end of the x-axis. And then you will realize that you were back where you started when you were at 0, 0. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. The problem is people get excited about the little bit of knowledge that they learn. And then they want to tell the world.
This is what Musk did. Musk stretched the surface and he thought he was really deep into the animal.
Yeah.
He'd stabbed a big monster and, I mean, he was literally dissecting and he was kind of at the heart of it. He wasn't even close to that. And he got excited and he spilled the beans all over the media, which I'm wondering if it wasn't part of the plan. We don't know. Even that could have been part of the plan, right? It could have been like a little covert maneuver in a different direction, but
I really wouldn't know.
Yeah, so I mean, these things go really deep. But I mean, from where I stood, it was like it was just too obvious that the stuff that he mentioned was just too ridiculous. To be taken seriously.
Yeah, almost like they kind of were being ironic and had a sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah. It's like an Argo movie, that Alan Arkin movie. Argo, where they had to, a movie within a movie, just to get people, in any case.
Yeah. But you know, this whole thing about gaining a little bit of knowledge and then getting excited about it and telling others about it, as you move towards the right end of the x-axis, but haven't gone far enough before you open your mouth. I've seen a lot of that nowadays in discussions about Christianity. I don't know if you've seen that.
What's specific about Christianity?
Okay, so have you ever read The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop?
No.
Okay. So his basic premise, and he supports it with quite convincing evidence, is that when Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their 4 wives came out of the ark and created civilization in Mesopotamia and southern Turkey, and spread west and kind of occupied that whole kind of basin. The first person to create a city after the flood was Nimrod. Okay,
and mighty hunter.
That's right. Yeah, and so he basically re-civilized the area, and he built a walled city because after the flood there was an uncontrolled growth in predator populations. This is why it was significant that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And it wasn't just hunting in terms of getting food, because that wasn't complicated, that wasn't really a necessity. You had that fertile Mesopotamian basin, you had knowledge of agriculture, and you had more of the clean animals than you had of the unclean. So it was quite straightforward for them to obtain sufficient protein, even with the firmament destroyed and, things not growing as well as they did before the flood. The sense in which he became prominent as a hunter was the sense in which he defended urban populations, both by urbanizing them, by building walled cities around them, and by spreading the domination of that population across that basin by suppressing the growth of predator populations. And this is why he's often portrayed as someone wearing a leopard skin, you see, because he hunted leopards. And of course he was from Ham. Ham begat Cush, Cush begat Nimrod. So he was Ham's grandson, who then became the father of everyone who migrated into the African continent. And even to this very day, he's still honored amongst figureheads in leadership where they wear a leopard skin. So that is a continuous tradition going all the way back to, what was that? It's roughly 1700 years after creation. What was that, like 2300 BC or thereabouts? Now, the thing is, in order to successfully dominate a population, it wasn't enough just to organize an administration for them and then allow them to develop uncoordinated, divergent philosophies about the nature of life. You had to coordinate that as well. And so, bearing in mind that we're talking about Noah's great-grandson, the deposit of knowledge that was accumulated by Adam and, whatever, Seth, Canaan, Mahalalel, whoever it was, up until Noah, was in the hands of Noah. And what would they have been doing during that year or so on the ark? If they hadn't already done so up until that point, Adam would have been indoctrinating them with the truth of creation, God's plan for creation, the significance of this ark event within the context of planned history. And so all eight of them would have emerged from the ark understanding God's plan of salvation to redeem humanity, them being involved in the most physically conspicuous aspect of that plan, the preservation of humanity, and therefore the availability of genes to produce a line of elect that God would redeem, and therefore the necessity of there being a Messiah who would one day emerge, who would redeem fallen humanity and buy them back. Do you see what I mean? And so this knowledge that there would one day be the seed of the woman that would redeem mankind, albeit an elect contingent of mankind, this was in the minds of all eight who emerged from the ark, and obviously would have been disseminated to their children and their children's children. So there is absolutely no question whatsoever that Nimrod was very well apprised of the facts relating to the progeny of the Messiah, his characteristics, the work he would do. And so now, with that in his mind, when he's civilizing a population and building a wall, and interestingly, that symbol of a wall is a zero. And this was the kind of origin of the Babylonian system of worship, which relied on double words. Do you see? So the Chaldean language had two meanings, at least, for each word. So, for example, where you had the word tur, like we would write it now as T-U-R, that meant leader, but it also meant bull do you see? From which we get the word Taurus. And so the way you would teach the, let's say the proletariat, hoi polloi, about the significance and strength of leadership would be relating it to the characteristics of a bull. You don't mess with a bull, okay? And so the way you would, for example, identify a leader would be to remove the horns of a bull, mount them on a leather band, and place them on the head of the leader. So you associate
obviously
the
like following the example they read of in Asterix and Obelix.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
The Gauls.
That's right. And so now...
Because that, I mean, I think it's quite an ancient publication. If you look at the address in the comics.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I think you're right. Yeah. So this is why leaders wear horns on their head. Now, obviously, you have different hierarchies of leadership. And so now you have to differentiate a minor leader from a more primary leader. And so then it becomes a bit ungainly to set lots of bull's horns into a band, and it's kind of heavy and messy. So then they start carving them out of progressively more valuable materials until eventually you have a gold crown. And then the word crown, you see, of course, is from the French couronne. And the word couronne is from the French corne. And corne is simply horn. Okay.
So coronation is placing horns.
Horns on a person's head to denote leadership in homage to the ancient Babylonian tradition of having dual meanings attached to one word, so that you could attach the kind of very visible, memorable values associated with that one word to your more subtle concept that that word also denoted. Do you see what I mean? So now you have Nimrod emerging in the loins of his great-grandfather out of the ark, being indoctrinated with the plan of salvation. Now he acquires dominance over a group. And it's so interesting because, of course, we talk about the prophesied seed of the woman. And you know the word seed in Chaldean is zur. We would spell that Z-U-R. And so his name was Zur Nebo Gus. Nebo is prophet. Gus is Chaldean for Cush, what we call Cush. So he is the seed of the prophet Cush. So he, or Zernibogus, as you know, our Anglo-Saxon ancestors.
From which we get the word bogus.
And bogeyman, do you see? The bogeyman is the black thing with horns that children are trained to be frightened of. Because he was operating on the wrong side, unfortunately. But the point is, he now needs to create a national religion that successfully coheres the philosophies and value systems of everyone under his leadership into a united system. What's he going to do? Well, he knows that there is in our collective consciousness the expectation of the arrival of a Messiah who's going to be over humanity in the way that we still expect Christ to, when arguably he reigns from Jerusalem in physical form. Do you see what I mean? And so this was known, obviously, to Noah and to his sons. So it's not going to really stretch the bounds of our imagination today to expect that Nimrod would set up a system of worship that was predicated on all of those events and symbols that were already prophesied as coming and being assigned to the genuine Messiah, Christ, that would, of course, later come genuinely to redeem humanity in a two-part interaction first to establish his spiritual kingdom until the full number of them be come in, then eventually to come in judgment, to judge the quick and the dead, and to establish his physical kingdom from Jerusalem. And so, with it being known that that was the truth, and that's what would happen, Nimrod, therefore, established his man-made system that emulated the characteristics of that prophesied religion. Do you see what I mean? And so he then became the Messiah. The problem, of course, then happened. Don't forget, he then disseminated knowledge of this false religion, this counterfeit religion. And this is what a lot of modern people who are too busy with their TikTok to really think about it for more than 15 minutes have difficulty with assimilating. The concept of a pre-counterfeit. How can something be a counterfeit if the original has never been visible? Because the original was described in tremendous detail. You know, if I tell you, oh, by the way, I'm planning a new digital currency, and I tell you everything about it, you can go off and make that digital currency before I actually get around to launching it. You know, you make a fake, a Ponzi scheme, draw people in, use my credibility, use the logic of my system, and make a lot of money and run off and go and hide in Cape Town, you know, from the Bulgarian mafia. So you can do all of that. And it
sounds suspiciously like something that it has happened.
yeah. So, but you get the point. You don't have to wait for something that is described in detail, that is known, that is anticipated, that rings true in the collective conscious of humanity. You don't have to wait for all of that to happen before launching your own fake version of it. And so that's obviously what Nimrod would have done. And so now you get, and then of course, he would have taught it to the people under him. So he would have had like the kind of ecclesiastical equivalent of bishops and deacons and whatnot, you know, priests of Baal, you know, Khans. And so they then would have taught it to their adherents, but simplified versions that rely far more on the symbolism of the physical object rather than the kind of ethereal, esoteric level of comprehension of the religion that only became accessible to the initiated, you know, to the trained, to those who obtained a level where they could understand the real meaning of the symbol that was the extent of the understanding of hoi polloi, if that makes sense. Okay, and so, of course, they all knew about it. The problem is, it couldn't possibly end with Nimrod because it was too much of a good thing now. He had created the system of control that resonated with the people because it was very close to what they already expected, albeit a counterfeit. And so now, when his, was it his uncle? Was Seth his uncle? Oh, sorry, Shem. So Shem, whatever, it was his grandfather's brother, so his great uncle, I think that is. When Shem learnt about the wickedness of Nimrod and how he was creating this religion, according to Alexander Hislop, now of course, whenever you discuss ancient history, modern people say, oh, but there's no evidence. You weren't there and you don't have access to a primary source who was there. But if we can assume that this indeed happened the way it is described, what then happened is Shem hunted down his great nephew, Nimrod, cut his body into 14 pieces and sent a body part to each of the 14 provinces that Nimrod had established as a warning to say, listen, this person is not your Messiah. He's very much mortal. We've taken care of him. This is the end of that. But you see, he left behind his wife, who is usually known as Semiramis. But then in other languages, she's known as Astarte. Do you see? Or Ashtar. Do you see? And so now you have the making of a trinity, but there's one missing. So you have the father, who of course is Nimrod. You have the wife, who is Semiramis. And now she gives birth to a child. Now, arguably, she was inseminated by him before he died, but I think the timings don't quite match up. And I don't want to cast aspersions, but it's very plausible that somebody else was responsible for that insemination, and it was definitely not the Holy Spirit. So anyway, she now claims that the child that she gives birth to is him being born again, being resurrected. Do you see what I mean? And that then, of course, starts this whole reincarnation thing as it moves east. But as far as we're concerned, it's a resurrection. You know, as far as the West is concerned, we think of it as a resurrection. The East thinks of it as a reincarnation. But anyway, he's not defeated. He just had to die to suffer for his people, which is evidence that he's an even more meaningful Messiah. But now he's born again as Tammuz. Do you see? And so now Tammuz, so they then worship him and make little shapes in the letter T, because that letter hasn't changed from the Chaldean rite, except their small t, I think, was the same as our large T. So now he is celebrated as Tammuz, and sacrifices made to him in honor of the sacrifice that his father made, or that he himself made, do you see, for humanity, by giving himself up to be cut into 14 pieces and sent to all the provinces. So now, how do you sacrifice to Tammuz? You make a letter T, like a cross shape, and you crucify people on it. Do you see what I mean? And so now, in Mesopotamia, you have now this trinity of Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. As knowledge of that spreads west, and the Egyptian empire overshadows the dying Mesopotamian empire, the language changes, and you now have Isis, Horus, and Seb. Okay, it's exactly the same trinity. There are just slightly different stories about how it happened, because now they have to geographize them to the Nile, do you see? So now on the banks of the Nile, someone gets shut up in a tree and the tree gets cut down. It's all sorts of nonsense, combining all this fertility symbolism with the Nile Delta and that geography and some weird aspects of religion that they've kind of brought in syncretistically, but it's all essentially the same religion. Then, of course, gets into Greece. He becomes a hero. He gets different names. He becomes Saturn. Saturn, of course, dies on the 23rd of December. He symbolizes that Saturn, of course, being that old red planet. Okay, so now you have a man in the festival of Saturnalia. He's represented by a man with a white beard, ancient, dressed in red. Of course, with obviously the modern Father Christmas. And why the modern Father Christmas? Why are we calling it Christmas now in Christianity? Because, of course, remember, when Christianity, you can't say when it started, because, of course, it started in the Garden of Eden. But when post-Christ Christianity started, what then happened was Christianity remained an underground movement and suffered persecution for about 200 to 300 years. But then, of course, the powers that be, the Roman state, recognized that their method of trying to wipe out Christianity by persecution was having the opposite effect. And so, of course, if you can't beat him, you join him. Constantine then becomes a Christian. And he proves his Christianity by supporting the churches, by bringing them under his aegis, by commissioning scriptures, which is, of course, where the contamination of our scriptures came in, with all these modern Bible versions and whatnot, with 5,000 differences in the Gospels alone. So he now proves the sincerity of his conversion to the Christian church by allowing them to come out of the shadows and be given buildings, be given scriptures, that kind of thing. But now, as a statesman, as a politician, he can't upset the pagan contingent too much. So he has to allow them to maintain their pre-Christian symbols and rituals. So of course they used to celebrate the festival of Saturnalia every year on the shortest day of the year, being the 23rd of September generally. That's December, I mean, where the sun dies and then it's resurrected again on the third day. This was in honor of Nimrod dying and being resurrected as Tammuz. And so that celebration of Saturnalia, rather than telling the pagans, well, I'm sorry, I'm a Christian now, so we no longer have that. We no longer have these fertility symbols of coniferous trees that stay green throughout the year, where we go into the forest and we cut one down, like it says in Jeremiah 10. We bring it into the house and move it with nails. We fasten it with nails that it move not. We decorate it with silver and gold. As the Jews were commanded, do not as the heathen, for the customs of the heathen are vain. For one cutteth the tree out of the forest. And it describes all of that. Obviously, it's describing a Christmas tree a couple of thousand years before Christ is incarnated. And so now, all of these pagan symbols that came from Mesopotamia to Egypt, to Greece, to Rome, are maintained for the benefit of the pagans and have to be syncretistically embedded into Christian celebrations to keep both camps happy, which is exactly what a statesman and a politician has to do. Do you see what I mean? And so now the Christians are told, listen, you can celebrate your Christmas, but make sure it happens on the 25th of December, so it can coincide with our pagan sacrifices. And this one we used to call Saturn. We're going to call him St. Nicholas. Do you see? And this thing, this fertility symbol that I think came from Egypt, where someone was trapped in a tree. These young students of Egyptology can find it out very quickly. We're going to say that is a Christmas tree, and it represents new life and all that kind of thing. So we keep all of those ancient symbols that emerged from Babylon via Egypt, Greece, and Rome, and you just have to sanctify them. You have to Christianize them. So keep your dates the same, keep the symbols the same, and attach new meaning to those symbols, and everyone's happy. Do you see what I mean? But now, of course, in the 21st century, you have, young people who read a little bit of this, realize that somebody existed called Isis or Horus or Seb. Of course, it's wonderful because even as an Anglican and thoroughly supportive of the Anglican tradition and its theology in its original 17th century form, and we never did this, but the modern Anglicans, who are responsible for a lot of error, if you go into an Anglican church, you will see on the lectern there's often a little piece of nice material, a little piece of velvet, and on it they have those same letters, I, H, S. And if you ask one of the priests, they like to call themselves, what does it stand for? They'll say, it's something like Jesus hominum salvator, Jesus the saviour of mankind. Do you see what I mean? And yet, of course, you had that ancient trinity of Isis, Horus, and Seb. So, and of course, this is discussed in detail. Well, no, not really in detail, but is quite prolifically in the Old Testament about how those high places for Ashtaroth were always put there. You always had the competition between that fake religion started by Nimrod, who is Baal, and the true religion of the Jews. And they were often kind of merged syncretistically, and sometimes it was difficult to extricate the true from the false. Do you see what I mean? That's how it was so easy that Baal worship kept re-emerging throughout ancient Israel when they kept trying to get rid of it. So the problem now you have with the availability of information to just ordinary people who don't really have theological or historical education is that they read a little bit of this and they see, don't you know, I'm now highly enlightened and I know that like a couple of thousand years ago there was this religion, and there's this religion, and they think of it as lots of different religions, and they think that what Christianity did was it looked at all of these ancient religions and decided to create a kind of melange of all of these religions to make a man-made synthetic religion that capitalized on the kind of deposit of kind of human knowledge as it pertained to these kind of population controlling religions over thousands of years. And hey presto, that's how you get Christianity. Do you see? And people who are not really educated, who are exposed to these exposures, so-called, of Christianity, can become quite disappointed. But all they're doing is they are being invited to come from 0, 0 on our bell-shaped curve, start moving towards 1, 2 on the x-axis. And so now resistance, being on the y-axis, increases as their knowledge increases. So either with all of this stuff, just say, look, it's nonsense. Don't even bother looking into it. Or if it's too late and you've already started, if you don't know how to kind of lobotomize that part of your brain that's acquired that unwanted knowledge, you've got to go all the way. You've got to push all the way to the end, get involved in that scholarship, read books like Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylons, fully understand, properly read your Bible, understand the basis of what was prophesied in terms of a coming Messiah, then you won't have a problem. And you'll have the same level of lack of resistance as you did when you started. But do you see what I mean? How having this knowledge becomes very dangerous if you don't pursue it to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, but you also need to be very sure that your sources of finding this information is reliable. I wouldn't, for me, if I go into a website, for instance, that's loaded with ads and with some serious clickbait, I'm wondering, what the heck is this guy selling me? Even if he sounds like he's on my side, I'm thinking, this guy is selling an energy drink or some sort of mental boost. And you get that. You get these folks are selling something, and they're using the exact same thing that they accuse the enemy of using. I saw this in politics too, where the right and the left often act the same way and rile against the other party, but they're doing the same things. They're doing the same thing. So you got to be careful. I agree with you. I think it's a good thing to go all the way, actually, if you're willing to face some internal persecution, if you will, because I think you'll have a lot of cognitive dissonance to deal with when you think of certain things. But it's worth going, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful that you don't gaslight yourself. You're not gaslit by other people, and you don't gaslight yourself. So
and I mean, why that's all relevant is because we're talking about war, preparation for war. And I was explaining to you at the beginning that preparation for war happens long before you actually see the war. And if you accept the Christian proposition, it's a war. Do you know? And so those same kind of preparations that begin before the visible war happen in spiritual warfare as they do in physical warfare.
I need my papers because I need to. We can't not do that. Ooh, Ryan's going to kill me if he sees I've almost shared his ID photo.
Did you?
No, I didn't.
Did you dox him?
I'm going to dox my buddy. Okay, well, that brings us to a close for this episode. Thanks once again, John. And I suppose now's a good time to say we need sponsorship. I really am desperate for more good coffee, and at this stage I'll probably settle for lesser coffee, just to have some free coffee. So if you make coffee, sponsor us, please. We'll probably forget to mention your name in the video, but hey, what the heck, man? It's cheap coffee in any case.
But Jantie, are you aware that daar is koffie in die kan?
Daar's koffie in die kan. As hy, hoe's hy? Julle gewone praat hierdie man Afrikaans. I'm thinking this is going to change into Boer and Brit. Boer and Brit.
Ja.
I'm telling you now.
So,
Thank you for tuning in, and hopefully there'll be another one soon. If not, hey, see you here, there, or in the air if you're a Christian. Okay.